Hey mystery lovers. I'm just here to haunt you with some creepy stories that'll send chills down your spine. Before we start, hit subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's get started.
The beast was waiting. It stood there, steaming in the moonlight, its matted fur clinging to skeletal ribs that jutted out like broken bars on a cage. The stench, God, the stench, hung thick in the air. Sweat and rot and something worse. Its breath poured out in rancid clouds, curling and writhing in the cold like it had a life of its own. And that eye, that single black, glinting eye, locked on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The other eye, the one sewn shut with crusted blood, seemed to weep a dark, sluggish crimson. It didn't blink, didn't flinch, as though the beast itself was carved from the nightmares of a mad god. Its breath filled the silence with wet, rattling sounds, and I swear, it felt like it was timing my heartbeat. The moon behind it, red as spilled wine, cast the city in jagged shadows. I thought I saw movement far off, something stirring in the clouds, but my attention flicked back too late. The beast lunged. The impact knocked the air from my lungs in a single, jagged wheeze. Pain exploded in my chest as claws tore through skin, muscle, bone, pinning me like an insect on a specimen board. The smell hit me then, stronger than before, like the entire graveyard had exhaled at once. I tried to scream. Nothing came out but a choked gargle, blood rushing up my throat, filling my mouth with iron. I couldn't stop it. Couldn't fight it. My body was no longer mine. It lifted me like I weighed nothing, claws digging deeper, grinding against ribs as the ground spun below. Sky, street, sky, everything blurred until I was staring into that yawning chasm of a mouth, pus-stained teeth dripping with saliva. Its eye, oh, God, its eye.
It looked at me, and for one horrifying second, I saw satisfaction.
Human satisfaction. And then, I flew. The impact came next, sharp and jarring, like I'd been thrown by a train. My back hit the cobblestones hard, the cold seeping into my skin, my body screaming in pain as I tried to move. But I couldn't. I could only watch. That's when I saw it. It wasn't a savior. It wasn't salvation. It was something worse. Black wings. Enormous, jagged, stretching wider than any creature had a right to. They beat against the night like thunder, stirring the clouds, framing this thing against the bleeding moon. Its neck was long, sparsely feathered, snaking like a branch struck by lightning. Its eyes, 4 of them, glowing like embers, pierced the darkness, fixed on the beast. The two collided with a deafening crash, a whirlwind of claws, wings, and howls that rattled my very bones. The beast thrashed against its attacker, blinded and maddened, but it was no match. To this winged abomination, the beast was nothing but prey. With a single snap, it tore into the beast's skull, ripping head from body like pulling a weed from dry earth. Blood rained down, soaking the cobblestones in a crimson flood. The angel, no, this was no angel, tilted its head back and swallowed. The beast's head disappeared into the abyss of its maw, gone. In a single, horrifying gulp. It screeched then, a sound so piercing it made my teeth ache, rippling through the puddles around me. And with a mighty flap of those black wings, it lifted the lifeless, headless body of the beast and disappeared into the clouds, leaving only silence in its wake. But I wasn't alone. A murder of crows gathered at the edges of my vision, black feathers gleaming in the blood-drenched moonlight. They waited, patient and silent, for my last breath. I couldn't die. Not here. Not like this. My arm, broken and bloodied, dragged itself toward my belt. My fingers fumbled, sticky with blood, until I found it. The elixir. The vial gleamed like salvation in my trembling hand. I drove the needle into my thigh, hard, past muscle, past skin, past the fractured bone itself. The pain was instant, searing through my body like liquid fire. Every muscle contracted at once, my spine arched off the ground, my mouth opened in a soundless scream as my bones reset themselves with sickening snaps. My flesh stitched itself back together in a wave of agony, but it wasn't me. It would never be me again. The curse of the elixir wasn't in the pain. It was in what it left behind. My body was whole, but it wasn't mine. I could feel it. Foreign, wrong, stitched together like a patchwork of something other. The crows scattered as I rose, my breath ragged, my hair heavy with blood. Pain pulsed through me, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was alive. The moon above had dimmed, the crimson hue fading into black, but the darkness felt heavier now. My eyes adjusted, and for a moment, I thought I saw it, far off, high in the clouds. The angel. Watching me. And I realized something as I stood there, shaking and alive, staring into the void. It hadn't spared me. It had chosen me. For what, I didn't know. But as the last caw of the crows echoed into the night, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't alone. And I never would be again. The gloom around me was fractured by dark red puddles, the moonlight bouncing off them and stabbing into my straining eyes. The blood, mine and the beast's, mixed together across the stones, swirling and curling like oil on water, forming patterns I couldn't stop staring at. They felt alive. I couldn't help but imagine the same thing was happening inside me, the monster's essence now mingling with my own. The thought sent a shiver of revulsion through me. Every movement was agony, but I forced myself upright, the cobblestones scraping against my hands. My head spun with the effort, my vision swimming in the faint light. My shirt clung to me, soaked through, and beneath its shredded remains, I saw the truth. Purple veins, hideously bloated, engorged like worms, spread across my pale skin, snaking toward a band of blackened flesh that stretched from my shoulder to my hip. My fingers trembled as I touched it, the heat searing and unnatural, forcing me to pull away. I found something harder beneath, something solid. My ribs had fused together into a grotesque, unyielding plate, their movement gone. Breathing came shallow and sharp, like trying to fill my lungs with broken glass. The sight rooted me in place. My body wasn't mine anymore. But panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. The puddles of blood around me glistened like a beacon under the crimson moon, their sickly shine calling to whatever horrors lurked in the dark. Beasts would come. Predators always come when there's blood. I had to move. The effort to stand was monstrous. My ankle, God, my ankle, was stiff and unresponsive, like a dead limb still attached. My gait was a lurching hobble, pain shooting up with every step, but somehow, the streets seemed merciful that night. I encountered nothing. No sounds, no creatures, nothing but the hollow silence of my footsteps. I made it home. But the house wasn't a sanctuary. The nights that followed were plagued by terrors, phantasms that danced on the edges of my vision, shadows that whispered my name. Sleep became an unattainable dream. My mind refused to rest, replaying the moment I saw it, the angel. No, not an angel. Something else entirely. Something divine, yes, but in the way a storm is divine, or an erupting volcano. Indifferent. Devastating. I capitalized its name because I was sure there could be only one. A singular creature, unmatched and unseen. I told myself those who had encountered it before me simply hadn't lived to tell the tale. The nights I couldn't sleep were spent locked in my library, surrounded by my father's collection of zoological texts. The fire never smoldered, I couldn't let it. The thought of darkness creeping in, of those disfigured wings spreading inside my own home, was unbearable. I even covered every mirror and reflective surface, though. That was for a much darker reason. The angel consumed me. I pored through book after book, desperate for answers. As a pharmacist, I had a scientific mind. I needed to believe this thing was a beast, a product of some grotesque evolution, not a herald of the divine. I studied mutations, evolutionary biology, anything that might explain what I saw. But every discovery brought me back to my own failing body. The corruption was spreading. I could feel it, pulsating beneath my skin. That black band around my torso, once burning with unnatural heat, had cooled now, but the veins feeding into it remained swollen and angry, their vivid purple hue impossible to ignore. Worse, the black mass pulsed. Not with my heartbeat, but with its own rhythm. 30 beats per minute. Separate. Independent. My own heart hammered at a constant 150, no matter how calm I tried to be. And yet this thing inside me throbbed with eerie patience, as though it had no interest in keeping pace with my life. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd run my fingers along the surface of the blackened flesh, imagining it was a parasite, some enormous leech feeding on me. There was no evidence for this, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't stop hearing it. Each throb felt louder than the last, echoing in my ears, resonating through my bones. I wanted to claw at it, to rip it out with my bare hands, but I knew that would be worse. This was the price I paid for the elixir. The very thought of it turned my stomach. That concoction, my invention, was supposed to save lives. I'd tested it on rats, watched it knit their flesh together in seconds, repair broken bones, restore what was lost. But this was something else. I hadn't saved my life. I'd bargained for it. The tissue inside me wasn't my own. The bones that had mended weren't mine. I was something stitched together, something borrowed, something wrong. And I knew it wouldn't stop. As for my appearance, God help me, I cannot bear to describe it. It's grotesque beyond comprehension, a mockery of the man I once was. After catching a single glimpse of my blackened, inhuman eyes in the mirror, I smashed every reflective surface in my home. I didn't just remove the mirrors, I obliterated them, shards of glass scattered like the remnants of my shattered self. Locking myself away felt like the only choice, though I told myself it was purely for research. There's comfort in solitude when you become this. The thought of anyone seeing me in my current state was unbearable. London continues to breathe its peculiar life despite the horrors that prowl its streets. Beasts roam freely, but for most, they're just an inconvenience, no more troubling than a pack of feral dogs. Yet fear, that primal, unspoken dread, hangs heavy in the air. No one dares admit it, but fear governs this city now. I fear less for the beasts and more for the question they leave unanswered: where did they come from? My home is no longer a sanctuary but a laboratory. The grand piano that once adorned the center of my library now lies against the far wall, its majesty displaced by corkboards, blackboards, and chaotic arrangements of notes, photos, and rambling theories. Red threads crisscross the room, connecting fragments of my maddened thoughts into a tapestry of obsession. To the outside world, it would look like the work of a lunatic, a man consumed by conspiracies. But to me, it is my life's work, a desperate attempt to understand the beasts. And the angel. My obsession is no longer enough, I need evidence. Proof that what I saw was real. The night was cloaked in a suffocating fog, twisting and curling like ghostly hands around my coat. The gas lamps stood unlit, their attendants too frightened to venture out after dark. The streets were a void, broken only by the rumble of my wagon wheels against the cobblestones. Inside my trolley, I carried everything I needed for my grim expedition: a tailboard camera, glass vials for samples, a microscope, a phosphorus flare, and this very journal. My belt bore fresh injectors of my cursed elixir and a cold steel revolver. The gun felt heavy, its presence a contradiction to my pursuit of knowledge, but necessary. After all, what good is discovery if I'm too dead to report it? The city watched me. Windows stared with judgmental eyes, their curtains drawn but fires glowing behind them, casting orange irises that seemed to bore into my soul. For a fleeting moment, I envied those inside, locked away from the nightmares that stalked the streets. But I wasn't like them. I had a purpose: to capture proof of the angel. My destination was the church spire, the tallest structure for miles. From there, I planned to lure the creature with a phosphorus flare and capture its image with the camera's flash pan. Evidence. Irrefutable, undeniable evidence. But my single-minded focus was shattered by a sound, a growl, low and resonant, vibrating deep within my chest before it reached my ears. I froze. Turning slowly, I scanned the street for the source. The fog concealed much, but there, in the dark mouth of an alley, I saw it. Teeth. Yellowed, jagged teeth glinting faintly in the moonlight. The growl came again, deeper this time, and then I saw the claws, jagged and cruel, catching the light as they emerged from the shadow. The beast was stalking me, its movements calculated, deliberate. Panic clawed at my throat as I reached for the revolver at my hip, my hand trembling. This creature was smaller than the last, but that didn't make it less terrifying. Bones cracked sickeningly as it rose on twisted legs, its joints dislocating and reforming with grotesque pops. Its torso was misshapen, fur matted with blood that dripped down its chest in thick rivulets. Its arms were unnaturally long, ending in razor-sharp claws, and sunk deep into its chest was the hilt of a butcher's knife, an eerie monument to its resilience. It stood a foot taller than me, its grotesque frame illuminated by the hazy moonlight. It growled again, then charged. The beast moved with terrifying speed, its broken legs propelling it forward in a lurching sprint. I fired the revolver. The first shot hit its shoulder, the second tore into its chest. I fired again, and again, until 5 bullets had sunk into its monstrous flesh. Each impact was accompanied by the wet sound of tearing meat, but the beast didn't slow. It didn't even flinch. As it closed the distance, I raised the gun one last time, aiming for its head. At such close range, the bullet tore through its eye, shattering the cornea, ripping apart the retina before the lids even had a chance to close. The optic nerve disintegrated in a split second, severing the beast's vision entirely. But the pain, if it had any time to feel it, was brief. The bullet plowed through the creature's skull, turning brain matter into a grotesque slurry, an unholy soup of shattered thoughts and instincts, forcefully expelled through the back of its head. The cobblestones behind it became an abstract painting of red and brown. Even in death, it wasn't finished with me. The momentum of its charge carried the lifeless husk into me, a freight train of meat and sinew slamming me into the cold, unyielding cobblestones. I felt every bone in my back scream in protest as the air left my lungs in a desperate gasp. Pinned beneath its rancid, oozing corpse, the stench of rot and gunpowder filled my senses. It was suffocating, a foul cocktail of decay and violence. I thought I would drown in it, Choking on the nauseating fumes. Forcing the creature's weight off me was a Herculean effort. My muscles spasmed, trembled, and screamed for reprieve. When I finally rolled it off my chest, I lay beside the beast, staring into the void of the night sky, gasping for air that refused to come. My ribs, fused in the wrong places from the cursed elixir, fought against my diaphragm with every painful breath. When I regained enough strength to sit upright, I knew I couldn't waste the opportunity. I had to study it, this thing that had nearly killed me. My hands trembled as I uncorked a vial, pressing its glass edge against the creature's bullet wounds. The blood seeped in slowly, thick and viscous, its color unsettling. It wasn't crimson like mine or any other mammal's. It was a deep, sickly purple, tinged with something darker, something wrong. As I worked, my eyes wandered over the twisted anatomy before me. What I had mistaken for canine traits now revealed themselves to be disturbingly human. Its limbs, though warped and grotesque, bore a chilling resemblance to our own. The stretched, wiry skin clung tightly to its skeleton, splitting under even the lightest pressure to reveal jagged bones beneath. The ribcage was humanoid but misshapen, each bone fractured and reformed into unnatural angles. Its legs were the most horrifying of all, seemingly self-broken to allow for a wider range of motion. It had used its own agony as a weapon, a means to hunt, and I couldn't shake the sickening thought, this thing was human once. A noise snapped me out of my grim fascination. It wasn't the beast before me, no. This sound came from the shadows, the faint rustle of something alive, watching. Panic surged. I gathered my samples in a frenzy, fumbling with the vials and my equipment. My hands were slick with blood, its blood, and my trembling fingers could barely hold the glass. I had lingered too long, and I knew I had to leave. I knew the end was near long before I put the pen to paper. Each beat of my heart felt like a drum heralding my doom, the poisoned blood coursing through me, a cruel clock ticking down. There were moments I thought I could fight it, this corruption in my veins, this rot in my mind, but those moments were fleeting, swallowed whole by the shadow looming over me. The angel was coming. I'd barricaded myself in the library. The heavy wooden doors groaned under the strain of hastily placed furniture, every creak making me jump. I couldn't stop pacing, every step a futile attempt to outrun the fear gnawing at my sanity. The warmth of the fire in the hearth felt mocking, its light unable to touch the corners of the room where shadows writhed and shifted. The microscope sat on the desk, its cold, unfeeling gaze fixed on me like the eyes in the blood. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. That cursed device had shown me something no man should ever see, an endless sea of watching, waiting pupils, unblinking and full of disdain. Were they part of the beast I'd killed, or were they mine? I don't know how long I stared at that camera hanging from the line, its darkroom chemicals still faintly clinging to the air. I wanted so desperately to believe the image was nothing, a trick of light, a smear on the lens, but the truth was there, etched into that damn photograph. The angel wasn't just a figment of my mind. It was real. And it was looking at me. I didn't need to see the grotesque shape again to know what I'd captured. The faint outline of a bipedal figure, its form distorted and unnatural, its wings spreading like jagged knives across the frame. Around it, the border of flesh-like material, slick and feathered, formed something too organic to be anything other than living tissue. But the worst part? The eye. An eye so large it couldn't be real, yet it was. A black void rimmed with a fiery halo of red, staring back at me through the glass as if it had known, I would be the one to see it. I was never alone. The shadows in the room began to lengthen, moving like living things, stretching toward me with the inevitability of death itself. The fire in the hearth flickered violently, its light dimming until the warmth I had clung to was replaced by an unbearable chill. Then came the sound. At first, it was a faint rustling, like dry leaves caught in the wind. It grew louder, sharper, until it was unmistakable, the sound of wings beating the air. They weren't like a bird's, no, these were heavier, rougher, each flap a raw and tortured motion. I froze. The walls seemed to press inward, the shelves groaning under the weight of unseen pressure. The window panes rattled as the sound closed in, and my breath came in ragged gasps, the taste of iron heavy on my tongue. Then I saw it. The fire died completely, plunging the room into near total darkness. Only the faintest glow from the photograph remained, illuminating the figure that now stood on the other side of the barricaded doors. Its silhouette was immense, larger than any man could be, the wings folded tight against its back casting distorted shadows across the walls. Its head tilted unnaturally, a jerking, twitching motion, as if it were listening for my heartbeat. And I knew it was. The first impact shook the entire room. The barricade shuddered, splinters flying from the ancient wood. I stumbled back, my knees buckling as the angel's claws tore through the door, leaving deep gouges that wept splinters and dust. The second blow came faster, more violent. The furniture I had so desperately thrown against the door shifted, legs scraping against the floor as the angel pushed forward. I wanted to scream, to beg, but my voice caught in my throat. Its face appeared in the gap it had created, a blackened, leathery visage with too many eyes blinking in perfect synchrony. They weren't human, weren't alive, but they saw me. Every single one of them saw me. I ran. My legs carried me up the narrow staircase to the upper level of the library, where I thought I could escape, but deep down, I knew better. The angel wasn't something I could run from. It wasn't chasing me, it was hunting me. I could hear its talons scraping against the stone floors below, each deliberate step echoing in the silence. The sound of its wings dragging along the walls was unbearable, a raspy, tearing noise that set my teeth on edge. Reaching the upper level, I turned to face the door, revolver in hand. My fingers trembled so violently I could barely hold the weapon steady. The shadow at the base of the stairs stretched upward, growing larger, darker, until it consumed the steps entirely. Then it came. The angel moved like nothing I'd ever seen, its body twisting and contorting to fit through the narrow staircase, its wings folding in unnatural angles. It didn't charge, it didn't have to. Its presence alone was enough to root me to the spot, my legs refusing to obey even the most basic instinct to flee. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I felt everything I was unravel. This wasn't just a creature. It was a force, an inevitability. A reminder that death isn't something you can run from or fight. I raised the revolver, firing blindly into the black mass before me. Each shot seemed to pass through it, the bullet swallowed by the void. The angel laughed. Not a human laugh, but a sound that echoed in my very bones, a deep, guttural noise that spoke of centuries of anguish and rage. It reached out with one clawed hand, and before I could react, it was upon me. The last thing I felt was the icy grip of its talons around my throat, lifting me from the ground with effortless strength. Its face was inches from mine now, the countless eyes boring into me with a malevolent intelligence. And then, as the world began to fade, I realized something. It wasn't killing me out of anger or hunger. It was taking me because it wanted me. I wasn't its victim. I was its prize. The last thing I saw was its gaping maw opening wide, rows of jagged teeth glistening in the dim light. And then, nothing. Just the cold embrace of darkness. Forever.
And that's it for today's story. But you know, the mysteries we uncover? They never really end, they linger, don't they? Waiting. Hiding. In the shadows. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, go ahead, hit subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next tale, the one that might just keep you up at night. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and hey, never stop questioning the world around you. See you in the next one.